The space station floated in the deep silence of space, shining like a tiny silver star against the endless darkness. People lived and worked inside it every day, moving through its bright hallways, checking machines, taking notes, and talking about strange discoveries from faraway planets. But that week, the atmosphere inside the station felt different. Even the sound of footsteps seemed quieter. Everyone carried a mix of fear and curiosity on their faces, because something new had arrived. Something no one had expected. Inside the lowest level of the station, there was a reinforced cell made of thick metal walls and shining energy shields. The workers called it the Vault Room. Normally, it was used to store rare samples or dangerous minerals. But now, it held something alive, something massive, powerful, and unlike anything most humans had ever seen up close. A captured alien dragon. The creature was so huge that when it shifted its weight, the floor vibrated slightly. Its scales were dark, but shimmered faintly like burning embers whenever it breathed. Its wings were folded tightly against its sides, but whenever it moved them even a little, they cast long shadows across the cell. And its eyes, glowing in shades of deep gold, watched everything with a sharpness that made even the bravest workers step back. People on the station had seen many alien species over the years. Some were friendly, some were strange, and some were simply mysterious. But this dragon seemed different. It wasn't just powerful, it looked angry. Deeply, painfully angry. On the first day after its capture, a group of researchers had tried to approach the cell. They stood behind the energy barrier, watching the creature with serious faces. One of them took out a scanner, trying to understand its biology. Another whispered about its rare species, while the others simply stared, wondering how such a huge being could survive in space. But when they stepped closer, the creature suddenly roared. The sound was so loud it felt like the air itself shook. Dust drifted from the ceiling, cups rattled on nearby tables, and one of the scientists dropped his device in fear. The dragon slammed its tail against the metal floor, making the room tremble. Even though the energy shield kept it from escaping, everyone ran back, terrified. From that moment on, no one dared approach the cell again. News spread through the station quickly. In the cafeteria, people whispered about the creature's temper. In the hallways, workers paused to talk in hushed voices about the roar they had heard all the way from the lower levels. Some said the dragon could break free if it wanted. Others said it was only a matter of time before something went wrong. But while the adults were scared and worried, there was someone on the station who didn't seem scared at all. A little human girl who lived there with her guardian. She was small, quiet, and curious. She spent most of her time exploring the safe areas of the station, watching the workers fix machines or sitting near the big windows that showed the stars. She liked to press her face against the glass and watch the galaxy stretch out forever, as if she were trying to memorize every color and every sparkle. Unlike the adults, she didn't react much to the whispers or the tension. Whenever she heard people talking about the dragon, she simply listened with wide eyes, not out of fear but interest. She didn't understand why everyone kept calling the captured creature dangerous. Whenever she passed by the observation screens on the upper level and saw it sitting in the corner of the cell, she didn't feel afraid. She felt something else, something quiet and strange, like a memory she couldn't fully reach. One afternoon, her guardian went to fix a machine in a nearby room and told her to stay in the corridor until he finished. But she wandered a little, walking slowly along the smooth metal pathway, following the glowing guide lights on the floor. They always fascinated her as they changed colors depending on which level of the station she was on. While walking, she noticed a big viewing window at the end of the hallway. It wasn't a window to space, it was a window looking down into the vault room. Curious, she walked closer and pressed her hands against the glass. Peering inside, there he was, the dragon, huge still, and glowing faintly under the soft lights of the cell. The workers standing nearby didn't notice her at first. They were too busy whispering and checking the monitors. But the dragon noticed her immediately. It lifted its head, its golden eyes narrowing as if trying to get a better look. The girl didn't move. She simply stared, fascinated by the creature's size and strange beauty. For a long moment, neither of them moved, as if the entire station had gone silent around them. A worker suddenly noticed her. Hey, step back. It's dangerous here," he said, rushing toward her. His voice startled her, and she stepped away from the window. When she looked back at the dragon, something unexpected had happened. The creature was calmer. Its wings were no longer stiff and ready for attack. Its tail wasn't thrashing. Even its breathing sounded slower, softer. It tilted its head slightly, watching the girl through the glass with an expression that didn't look angry anymore. It looked almost confused. The workers noticed the change too. One of them leaned closer to the monitor, blinking. Why did it calm down suddenly? He whispered, "Is something wrong with the energy field?" Another shook his head. "No, the systems are fine. It just stopped." They didn't realize the real reason. The girl didn't either. All she knew was that she didn't feel scared when she looked at the dragon. Something inside her felt warm and familiar, though she didn't understand why. Her guardian returned soon after and gently pulled her away, reminding her not to play near important areas of the station. She nodded, but her attention stayed on the window behind him. Even as she walked away, she glanced back one last time. The dragon watched her until she disappeared from view. For the rest of the day, the workers in the vault room tried to observe the creature again, but they couldn't understand what they had seen. Every time a human approached, the dragon growled or paced restlessly. But when the girl had stood there, it had gone completely quiet. That wasn't normal. In the evening, when the station's artificial lights dimmed to signal rest hours, a group of researchers met in the control room. They discussed the dragon's behavior, the girl's sudden appearance, and the strange calm that followed. One of the older scientists rubbed his forehead, looking troubled. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "These creatures are known to be fiercely protective and extremely emotional. They don't just calm down for no reason." Another researcher leaned back, thinking aloud. Maybe the dragon saw something familiar in the child. Or maybe her presence reminded it of something. "We need to run more tests." But no matter how much they argued or analyzed the situation, they couldn't agree on any explanation. The only thing they knew was that the creature, which had been roaring and shaking the cell all morning, had gone completely quiet the moment the girl arrived. That night, the girl sat near one of the big station windows again, swinging her legs as she watched the stars drift by. She remembered the dragon's eyes, how they glowed softly, how they had followed her calmly instead of angrily. It felt strange, almost like the creature had recognized her. She rested her head against the window glass, watching the galaxy spin slowly outside. She didn't understand the feeling she had in her chest, the quiet tug in her heart when she thought about the creature. But she didn't feel scared, not even a little. Somewhere deep inside the station, in the quiet darkness of the vault room, the dragon lowered its massive head and rested it against the floor. Its glowing eyes shifted gently, as if remembering something from long ago, something warm, something small, something precious, something it thought it had lost forever. And even though the workers had no idea why the creature had suddenly calmed down, the girl's brief presence had already changed everything, because the dragon had not just seen a human child through the glass. It had seen a memory that would soon unfold in ways no one on the station was prepared for. Days passed after the first encounter with the alien dragon, and the station buzzed with tension and quiet curiosity. No one could forget the way the creature had calmed in the presence of the little girl. Scientists recorded data, technicians checked systems, and security made sure no one accidentally wandered too close. Yet, despite all the precautions, everyone wondered the same thing. Why had the dragon reacted differently to the child? The girl herself didn't understand it either. She spent her mornings in small corners of the station, watching the stars, exploring corridors, or quietly sketching the strange creatures and machines she saw. But every day, her thoughts drifted back to the dragon. She remembered his glowing eyes, his enormous wings, and the strange, gentle warmth she had felt when he had looked at her. Even though no one told her to avoid the vault room, she found herself drawn to it again and again. Always watching from behind the thick glass dot, the researchers noticed this pattern. One afternoon, an older scientist, who had been observing the dragon for years, called a meeting. "It's unusual," he said, rubbing his chin. "This species has never behaved like this. They are territorial, aggressive, and quick to attack intruders. But every time the child is nearby, the dragon becomes calm. There's a connection, I'm sure of it. We just don't understand it yet." Some of the younger researchers were skeptical. "It could just be coincidence," one argued. "Maybe it's reacting to her size, or maybe she's giving off some kind of signal we don't know about. There's no way to be sure." But the older scientist shook his head. "I've studied these creatures for decades. This is no coincidence. There's something familiar there, something the dragon recognizes." Meanwhile, the girl's curiosity continued to grow. She remembered fragments from her early childhood snippets of places she had never been back to, sounds of wings flapping, and the gentle warmth of scales beneath her hands. Sometimes she dreamed of flying through the stars on a back much larger than her own body. She couldn't explain these memories. Her guardian had told her that when she was very young, she had survived a spaceship accident that had claimed her family, but she had never known the details. She only remembered feelings, safety, warmth, and a presence that had always been there. One evening, she returned to the viewing window without anyone noticing. The dragon was lying down, resting his massive head on his clawed paws. His wings were folded neatly, and his tail stretched across the floor like a great river. When he saw her, his eyes lifted, and for the first time, he made a sound that was not a roar. It was low, soft, almost a whisper. The vibration traveled through the metal floor, and the girl shivered. Somehow, she felt it in her chest, as if the sound was speaking directly to her. Her small hand rose, touching the glass carefully. "Hello," she whispered, though she barely knew why she was speaking. The dragon's eyes seemed to widen. His head tilted slightly, as though listening more closely, trying to understand. It was as if he was remembering something long ago, something important that had been forgotten for years. Back in the observation room, the scientists stared at the monitor in disbelief. One of them said, "That's impossible. He's never responded like this before. He's remembering something." The girl's guardian had followed her part of the way, but stopped when the alarms went quiet. He watched from the corridor, concerned but unable to pull her away. He didn't know why the dragon wasn't attacking. Something in his instincts told him that whatever was happening between the girl and the creature was beyond understanding. As the days passed, the station staff started digging through old records. They examined logs from previous space missions, especially ones that had encountered these rare dragons. One report, nearly a decade old, mentioned a toddler who had survived a crash in a distant sector alone, protected by a dragon species thought to be violent and aggressive. The researchers were stunned when they realized the girl on the station matched the details in the old record perfectly. Her age, her survival story, everything aligned. It was beginning to make sense. The dragon had not been captured randomly. Somehow, he had recognized the child he had protected years ago. But no one could explain how the connection had remained so strong after all this time. And no one could predict how he would react if she ever came too close. Meanwhile, the girl continued visiting the glass. She began speaking softly to the dragon, asking him questions she didn't even expect answers to. "Are you hungry?" she would say, or, "Do you miss your home?" She didn't know if he could understand her words, but she felt that something in him responded each time. He would shift slightly, his glowing eyes following her every move. Sometimes he made low sounds, almost like sighs, that seemed to carry emotion she had never felt before. Her guardian noticed the change too. "You shouldn't be spending so much time there," he said gently, though he too could feel the strange calm that radiated from the dragon whenever the girl was near. But she didn't listen. There was a pull she could not resist. She felt that if she could just reach out, if she could just speak, something important would happen. One night, when the station was quiet, the girl had a vivid dream. She was flying through space on a great set of wings, the stars streaming past her as she held on to something warm and alive. She could feel scales under her small hands, and a voice whispered her name in a language she didn't understand, but somehow knew. When she woke, her chest was pounding. She knew the dream wasn't just a dream. It was a memory she had buried deep inside her mind. The dragon, for his part, had begun pacing more slowly in his cell during the day, though his agitation returned whenever anyone other than the girl approached. Every time she appeared, he calmed completely, his massive form folding in on itself, his tail lying still, his wings drooping in a relaxed position. The researchers noticed the pattern and began calling it the child effect. They started observing her visits more carefully, taking notes and recording the dragon's reactions in detail. Some even proposed experiments to see if the calm could be replicated. But the girl didn't come to the cell for experiments. She came because she felt something was waiting for her. There, something important. Something she had lost long ago. Finally, a breakthrough came when one of the older scientists discovered an old holographic recording buried in the station archives. The recording showed a toddler and a dragon together, the dragon gently wrapping his wings around the child, while a ship nearby collapsed in flames. The child laughed and reached up to touch the dragon's scales. It was almost identical to the little girl on the station. The scientist's hands shook as he showed the recording to the team. "It's her," he whispered. "It has to be. This dragon, he isn't dangerous. He was her guardian." The revelation sent ripples through the station. Security protocols were reviewed, and every scientist and worker tried to understand what it meant. How had a creature so powerful and feared come to protect a human child? And how had the bond survived through years, even across different sectors of space? No one had answers yet, but one thing was clear. The dragon was not just a dangerous specimen. He was family. The girl didn't know any of this yet. She only knew that when she looked into the dragon's eyes, she felt safe. She felt remembered. And though no words had been exchanged, she understood that he recognized her too. That realization made her visit the cell every day, talking softly, laughing quietly when he made small, gentle noises, and sometimes just sitting there in silence, feeling the connection grow stronger. For the staff of the station, the story of the dragon and the girl became something extraordinary. They realized that sometimes what humans fear most is not the truth. The dragon, with his golden eyes and glowing scales, had been misjudged. He was not a creature of anger or violence. He was a protector, a being capable of deep connection, waiting for the child he had saved so long ago to return to him. And though no one yet knew what would happen next, one thing was certain. The calm presence of the little human girl had changed everything on the station. The dragon was no longer simply a captive or a threat. He was a guardian, a parent in waiting, and the first steps of their reunion were only just beginning. The station had grown unusually quiet that morning. Even the usual hum of machinery seemed softer, and the air felt heavier, as if everyone was holding their breath. No one could explain it, but there was tension in the hallways. Something was about to happen. The dragon, who had been pacing his cell for hours, was more restless than ever. His tail thumped against the reinforced floor, sending vibrations through the metal walls, and his wings twitched with impatience. The energy shields flickered faintly from his movements. As if even the station itself sensed his growing agitation, the scientists, who had spent the last few days studying the connection between the dragon and the little girl, were on edge. They had noticed that every time anyone approached the dragon, he reacted with fury, growling and smashing the floor with his tail. Only the child had a calming effect on him. But today was different. Today, the dragon was not just restless, he was furious. His golden eyes glowed brighter than usual, his scales shimmered like molten metal, and the low rumble of his growl reverberated through the station. The workers gave each other worried glances. Some whispered about how dangerous it could be if the dragon managed to break free, while others debated whether the calm he showed around the girl could last under the pressure of his anger. Security protocols were activated, alarms hummed faintly, and everyone prepared for the worst. Meanwhile, the girl wandered toward the vault room again, as if drawn by an invisible thread. She had been dreaming about the dragon the night before, dreams filled with warmth, flying through the stars on massive wings, and the gentle touch of scales under her hands. When she awoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that the dragon needed her, that something important was about to happen. She slipped quietly through the corridors, careful to avoid the busy staff, and reached the observation window. The dragon was lying in the center of the cell, but this time his body was tense. His wings twitched like lightning in a storm, and his claws scraped the floor with sharp, uneven sounds. He noticed her immediately, lifting his head and staring directly at her with blazing eyes. For a moment, neither moved. The station seemed to vanish around them. The hum of machines, the flicker of lights, even the footsteps of the scientists outside felt distant, as if all attention had been pulled into that single moment. Then something unexpected happened. The dragon's low growl turned into a soft, almost curious vibration. He tilted his head slightly, as though trying to understand why the small human had come again. The girl felt it too, a strange pull in her chest, as if the dragon were calling to her without words. "Hello," she whispered softly, pressing her small hand against the glass. She didn't know why she said it, but somehow it felt important. The dragon's eyes widened, and for a few seconds, the tension in his body melted slightly. It was the same calm she had seen before, but even more intense. She could sense a recognition, a memory rising from deep within him. The scientists outside were stunned. They had been monitoring his behavior closely, but now they couldn't believe what they were seeing. One of them whispered, "He? He's responding. He recognizes her." Another shook his head. "No, that's impossible. He shouldn't be able to remember after so many years." But the older scientist, who had been studying these dragons for decades, remained silent. He didn't need to speak to understand what was happening. Deep down, he knew that this species had incredible memory and loyalty, especially toward those they had bonded with. He could see the truth in the dragon's eyes, the spark of recognition, the echo of something lost long ago. The girl didn't notice the scientists or the whispers. She was focused entirely on the dragon. She felt a strange courage rising inside her. She wanted to reach out, to connect with him in a way she hadn't dared before. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here." Her voice was small, but firm, filled with warmth and certainty. At that moment, the dragon moved. Slowly, carefully, he stepped closer to the glass, lowering his massive head until his glowing eyes were level with hers. His breath created tiny puffs that pressed against the metal, warm and vibrating. The girl's heart raced, but she didn't step back. She knew instinctively that he wouldn't hurt her. Not now, not ever. The tension in the station escalated. Security personnel debated whether to intervene, fearing a sudden attack, but their hesitation grew as they observed the dragon's behavior. He was no longer the enraged creature they had feared. He was focused entirely on the girl, responding to her presence in a way no one could predict or control. Then, slowly, a sound escaped the dragon, a deep, resonant noise that filled the room and echoed in the hearts of everyone present. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was something softer, something almost human in its tone. The girl felt it vibrate through her chest, and tears welled in her eyes. She didn't know why, but she knew it was important. "Father?" she whispered. The words slipped out without thinking, as if her heart had known it before her mouth could speak it. The dragon froze instantly. His head lifted slightly, and his eyes widened, glowing even brighter. He lowered his massive body toward the glass slowly, almost reverently. The sound he had made earlier softened into a long, low hum, almost like a song. The station fell completely silent. No one moved. Even the hum of the machines seemed to fade into nothing. The girl pressed her forehead against the glass, staring into his eyes. She didn't understand all of it, but she felt the truth in her bones. This creature, this enormous dragon who had been feared by everyone, had been waiting for her. He had remembered her. He had never stopped remembering. The scientists could hardly believe what they were witnessing. The older researcher whispered to himself, "It's real. He's been her guardian all along." The records were correct. He motioned for the team to look at old mission logs and holographic recordings, showing images of the toddler and the dragon together in the distant past. The resemblance was undeniable. The dragon had protected her when her family's ship had been destroyed. He had carried her, cared for her, and waited for her to return. The girl's guardian, who had finally reached the observation window, could hardly speak. He understood now why she had felt so drawn to the dragon, why she had returned day after day. It was more than curiosity. It was a bond that had survived time and distance, a bond stronger than fear or reason. The dragon shifted his massive wings carefully, lowering his body further. He pressed his head gently against the glass, meeting the girl's gaze directly. She could see the warmth in his eyes, the softness beneath the scales that had once terrified the station. Slowly, she reached her small hand out, pressing it against the glass opposite his snout. She didn't know what would happen, but she felt a strange connection pass between them, a memory of trust, care, and love that had been waiting to be acknowledged. For the first time in years, the dragon stopped pacing. He stopped roaring. He simply stayed there, calm and focused entirely on the girl. The tension in the station seemed to melt, replaced by awe and disbelief. Everyone realized that this creature, feared and labeled dangerous, was not a monster. He was a guardian, a parent, a being capable of love and loyalty that humans could barely comprehend. The girl whispered again, "It's okay. I'm here." And this time, it wasn't just a word. It was a promise. The dragon lowered his head completely, letting his warm breath brush against the glass. He hummed softly, a sound filled with recognition and relief. For the first time in years, he had found what he had been searching for. The scientists watched in stunned silence, realizing that the story of the dragon and the little girl was more than just science. It was a story of survival, memory, and a bond that defied logic. The child had survived a disaster years ago, and the dragon had never stopped waiting. And now, through this simple act of recognition, the station witnessed the beginning of a reunion that would change everything they thought they knew about these creatures. The girl smiled softly, her tears falling quietly. She didn't need to understand the science behind it. She only knew the truth. The dragon was her guardian, and he had never stopped watching over her dot from that day onward. The relationship between the girl and the dragon began to grow, slowly bridging the gap between species, fear, and time. And even as the station staff prepared for what would come next, everyone knew that no one would ever see the dragon the same way again. He was not a threat, not a captive, not just a subject of study. He was family. The morning on the space station began like any other, yet a quiet excitement hung in the air. Word had spread about the little girl and the dragon, and the staff could not stop talking in whispers about the impossible connection. But no one dared approach the vault room. Not yet. Not until they fully understood what had happened the day before. The little girl, however, had no intention of waiting. She had felt something deep inside her, a pull she could not resist. She knew the dragon was not just any creature. He was more than that. Somehow, he had been waiting for her, protecting her all those years. And now, it was time to reach out, not just from behind the glass, but in a way that would make the bond real. Dot, as she walked toward the observation window, her small hands fidgeted slightly. She wondered what would happen if he reacted too quickly or became frightened. But a strange courage rose in her chest. She had seen his eyes. She had felt the recognition, and now she knew that words could bridge the gap between them. When she arrived at the glass, the dragon was already there. His massive body lay folded in the center of the cell, but his head lifted the moment he saw her. His golden eyes glowed softly, and the faint shimmer along his scales reflected the station lights. He had sensed her before she even spoke. It was a look she would never forget, patient, curious, and full of longing. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to disappear. The hum of machines, the chatter of the staff, the soft flicker of lights, all faded into the background. The only thing that mattered was the connection they shared across the thick glass. The girl's lips trembled as she whispered, "Father." The word escaped before she could stop it. It was soft, unsure, but filled with a deep, unspoken certainty. The dragon froze immediately. His head lifted higher, and his eyes widened as though he had heard a voice long lost, a name he had been waiting to hear for years. A low, deep hum rolled from his chest, vibrating through the floor and walls of the vault room. Even the staff outside the energy shields fell silent, unsure what they were witnessing, afraid to move and disturb the impossible moment. The girl pressed her forehead against the glass. "Father," she whispered again, and this time it was steady. She felt the warmth of something she had never truly known before. It was a bond older than words, older than memories, older than the years that had separated them. The dragon's response was immediate. He lowered his massive head until it was level with hers, his glowing eyes locked on hers. He exhaled softly, and the sound carried a strange melody, almost like a sigh mixed with relief and longing. For the first time in years, he had found her, the one he had protected, the one he had waited for. The scientists outside stared at the monitor in awe. The older researcher whispered, "It's true. He remembers her. He has never forgotten." Others nodded, their faces pale with amazement. They had studied these creatures for decades and had never seen anything like this. The bond between the dragon and the girl was unlike any connection in the galaxy, a connection that transcended fear, distance, and time. The girl's small hand rose and touched the glass, pressing it against his massive snout. Her fingers felt a faint warmth through the metal, and she could sense the vibration of his heartbeat. It was steady and strong, yet gentle. She felt the rhythm of his life, the same life that had carried her to safety all those years ago. "Father," she whispered once more, her voice trembling with emotion. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from fear, but from relief. She had found him. She had always known he existed, even when she had forgotten the details. And now he was here, alive, waiting, watching. The dragon leaned closer, pressing his snout gently against the glass. He lowered one massive claw and rested it beside her hand, careful not to crush anything. The sensation made her heart race, but she felt no danger. Only love, recognition, and a strange sense of home. The staff outside were silent. Some of them had never seen such raw emotion between two beings, two species, in their entire careers. It was beyond science, beyond understanding. And yet, it was real. For hours, the girl and the dragon remained there, connected through sight, sound, and a feeling that could not be named. Sometimes she would whisper memories she had from early childhood, fragments of warmth, flying through stars, and the gentle touch of scales. The dragon listened with patience, responding with soft hums and movements that seemed to communicate understanding. Later that day, the girl's guardian finally approached her cautiously. He had seen enough to know that the dragon posed no immediate danger, but he also understood that this was something far beyond control. "Be careful," he said softly, standing behind her. "He may recognize you, but he is still very powerful." She looked back at him briefly and smiled, then turned to the dragon again. "I know," she said, her voice small but firm. "But I'm not afraid. I've always known you were there." The dragon tilted his head slightly, and a small sound escaped him, almost like a gentle rumble. The girl laughed softly through her tears, and for a moment the tension in the station vanished. It was as if the world had paused, allowing two beings to reconnect without interference, without fear, without explanation. As the days went on, the bond deepened. The girl visited the vault room regularly, speaking to the dragon, laughing softly, and sometimes just sitting in silence, letting him watch over her. The scientists documented everything, taking careful notes, but they were careful not to interfere. Even the most experienced among them understood that this was not a situation to be controlled. It was a bond to be respected. The dragon began to show new behaviors. His wings relaxed more often, his tail stopped thrashing, and his body language became patient and calm whenever the girl was near. He responded to her words, her whispers, and even her silences, as if understanding her thoughts before she spoke. For the first time, he was not just a powerful, dangerous creature in a cell. He was a father, a protector, a being capable of deep, patient love. The girl felt it too. She had always wondered what family meant after losing her parents in the space accident, but now she understood. Family was not just about humans. Family was about connection, protection, and trust. And in that moment, standing before the dragon, she felt the full weight of that truth. She whispered once more, "I missed you," and the dragon's eyes softened even more. He made a long, gentle hum, moving closer to the glass, allowing her to place both hands against his snout. It was the closest they could be without breaking the safety protocols. But even through the barrier, the emotion passed between them. The scientists watched in quiet awe, understanding that they were witnessing something extraordinary. This was not a simple animal-human interaction. This was a reunion of beings separated by time and circumstance, united by a bond that no one could measure or explain. By the end of the day, the little girl's presence had changed the dragon entirely. He was calmer, more patient, and less restless than he had been for years. He no longer roared at the approach of the staff, and even the security personnel noticed a difference in his demeanor. The child's love had begun to heal the years of anger and fear that had built up in him. That night, the girl returned to her room, her mind filled with memories, whispers, and the warmth of scales against her small hands. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the dragon and the word she had spoken, the word that had changed everything. Father, for the dragon, The night was quiet, but his mind was alive with thoughts of the little girl. He remembered the day he had first protected her, the long years of waiting, and the endless hope that one day she would return. Now she had. And with her return, something inside him had finally relaxed, finally allowed him to feel a joy he had not known for years. And so, on the space station, life continued, but nothing was ever quite the same again. The little girl had found her father in a creature no one dared approach, and the dragon had found the child he had been waiting for, his family, his reason to calm his heart. The bond had been established. The first steps of a reunion had been taken, and everyone who witnessed it knew that this story of trust, memory, and love was just beginning. After the girl had called the dragon father for the first time, something shifted on the station. The tension that had filled the air for so long seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet anticipation. Everyone could feel that something extraordinary was happening, though no one could yet fully explain it. The dragon, once feared as a violent and dangerous creature, had calmed completely when the little girl appeared. The bond between them was growing stronger every day, and the station began to understand that this was more than a simple interaction. It was a story of survival, memory, and trust. The scientists were fascinated. They began digging deeper into the records of previous missions, trying to uncover every detail of the dragon's past and the girl's early life. What they discovered left them in awe. Years ago, the child's family had been traveling on a research vessel through a distant sector of space when disaster struck. A sudden explosion had destroyed the ship, scattering debris and putting everyone in danger. The girl, then only a toddler, had been left alone, surrounded by fire and chaos. But she had not been truly alone. The dragon had been nearby, patrolling the sector as part of his natural territory. When he saw the child in danger, he had acted instinctively, rushing to protect her. He had wrapped his massive wings around her, shielding her from harm. His scales had absorbed the heat of the explosions, and his strength had carried her away from the worst of the debris. Without him, the girl would not have survived. The revelation stunned the station staff. For years, they had assumed the dragon had been dangerous, aggressive, and uncontrollable. But the truth was entirely different. He had risked everything to protect a human child, a tiny, fragile life. His roars of anger during his capture had not been a sign of cruelty, but a reaction to the pain of being separated from her. The girl herself began to remember fragments of that past. At first, the memories were blurry, a flash of light, the warmth of scales beneath her hands, the sound of a deep voice comforting her. She had never known the dragon's name, nor had she remembered the details of his protection. But the feelings, the sense of safety, the bond, the love had stayed with her. And now, seeing him again, hearing the hums and vibrations of his body, the memories became clearer. One afternoon, she approached the vault room as usual. The dragon was pacing slightly, restless, but when he saw her, he immediately stopped. His massive head lifted, eyes glowing softly. The child pressed her small hand against the glass and whispered, "I remember now." The dragon's eyes widened, and he lowered his head closer to the glass. He seemed to sense the shift in her energy, the recognition of the past that had been locked away for years. A deep, resonant hum rolled from his chest, vibrating through the floor and walls of the vault room. It was a sound of relief, recognition, and joy all at once. The girl spoke softly, recounting the memories as best as she could. "I remember being scared," she said, "and you were there. You carried me. You made me safe." Her voice trembled with emotion, but she did not step back. She knew the dragon would not hurt her. He had always been her protector, and now she could finally say it aloud. The dragon responded with gentle movements, leaning closer to her hand, letting her feel the warmth of his body even through the glass. He lowered a massive claw slowly, careful not to make sudden movements, and pressed it lightly beside her hand. The sensation sent shivers through her small body, a mixture of awe and comfort. The station staff watched silently, amazed at the display. This was not just a simple observation of a captured creature. They were witnessing the reunion of two beings separated by years, united by a bond stronger than fear, distance, or time. The older researcher whispered, "He has always known her. He has always remembered her." Others nodded, their faces pale with wonder. For the first time, the dragon allowed himself to relax completely in her presence. He lay down, folding his massive wings neatly, tail stretched calmly across the floor. The little girl smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never experienced before. She spoke softly, recounting moments she had only remembered in fragments. The warmth of his scales, the gentle vibrations of his hum, the way he had always made her feel safe. Days turned into weeks, and the bond continued to strengthen. The girl's presence alone was enough to calm the dragon's fury, and his reactions to the staff became gentler. Even the scientists who had feared his aggression began to see him in a new light. They realized that his behavior had never been truly violent. It had been protective, a response to separation and loss. One day, the girl approached the glass and whispered, "I know what you did for me. You saved me when no one else could." Her voice was filled with gratitude and awe. The dragon responded with a deep hum, a vibration that felt like a heartbeat echoing through the room. His eyes, glowing with gold and amber, softened even more. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel joy without fear, to acknowledge the love he had carried silently for years. The scientists began sharing the story with the rest of the station. They explained the details of the accident, the dragon's protective actions, and the incredible bond that had survived despite years of separation. Everyone was moved. Even the most skeptical staff members could not deny the truth. They were witnessing a story of loyalty, love, and family that transcended species. The girl's guardian observed quietly, understanding finally why she had been drawn to the vault room every day. He realized that this connection was not something to be controlled or measured. It was something to be respected and nurtured. He watched as the little girl and the dragon communicated in ways no one else could fully understand, sharing emotions, memories, and unspoken understanding through glances, whispers, and the gentle hums of the dragon's body. Over time, small changes began to happen in the dragon's behavior. He became more patient, even when staff members approached his cell. He would no longer roar or thrash in anger, except when startled, and even then, his reactions were measured. The presence of the girl had transformed him, showing that the bond they shared was powerful enough to heal years of fear and anger. The girl, for her part, felt a growing sense of responsibility. She understood that this creature, once feared and misunderstood, had dedicated himself to protecting her. She felt a deep gratitude and a desire to care for him in return. Every visit to the vault room was filled with conversation, laughter, and gentle gestures. Sometimes she would just sit quietly, letting the dragon rest his massive head near her hand, feeling the warmth and vibration of life she had known only in fragments as a child. The bond they shared began to affect the station as a whole. Workers who had once feared the dragon started to approach the observation areas with curiosity instead of terror. They saw the gentle interactions between the girl and the dragon, and they began to realize that this was not a creature to be feared, but a being capable of deep emotion and loyalty. The station slowly became a place of understanding and respect, rather than tension and fear. One afternoon, the girl whispered to the dragon, "You are my family. You always have been." Her voice carried a quiet strength, a certainty that came from years of longing and finally being understood. The dragon responded with a soft hum, lowering his massive body closer to the glass and pressing his snout lightly against her hand. The moment was simple, yet profound, a silent affirmation of love, protection, and reunion. By the end of the week, it was clear that the dragon and the girl had formed a bond that would never be broken. They communicated through gestures, hums, and glances, each understanding the other without needing words. The girl had found her protector, her father figure, and the dragon had found the child he had saved and never forgotten. The station staff had learned a valuable lesson. Appearances could be deceiving, and the deepest bonds were sometimes invisible to those who did not look closely. They had witnessed the transformation of a feared, enraged creature into a gentle, protective guardian through the power of love and memory. And so, life on the station began to change. The dragon, once imprisoned and misunderstood, now had a purpose beyond observation or containment. The little girl, once alone and unaware of her past, now had a protector, a father, and a family. Together, they showed everyone on the station that trust, care, and love could overcome even the longest years of separation, and that some bonds were stronger than fear, stronger than distance, and stronger than time itself. The station had never felt so alive, yet calm at the same time. The little girl and the dragon had spent weeks slowly rebuilding the bond that had been lost for years, and now something was about to change forever. The staff watched carefully, aware that today might be the day when the impossible would finally happen, the day the glass separating them would no longer be needed, the day a family could truly reunite. The girl approached the vault room early in the morning. She had been thinking all night about what she wanted to do. Her small hand rested on the railing as she peered down at the massive dragon lying in the center of his cell. His golden eyes lifted immediately when he saw her, glowing softly with recognition and warmth. He had spent hours pacing quietly during the night, but the moment he saw her, his body relaxed completely. His wings folded gently at his sides, and his tail lay still. "Father," she whispered, stepping closer to the glass. The dragon lifted his head slightly, his nostrils flaring as if breathing in her presence. There was a deep vibration in his chest, a soft hum that carried through the floor and into her hands even though the glass was between them. The girl's heart beat faster. Today she would not just visit. Today she would cross the line that had separated them for so long. She knew the scientists and the staff were watching, but she didn't care. She felt a courage she had never felt before, a certainty that nothing could harm her. She had found her father. She had always known he was out there, and now he was here. The station's security chief hesitated nearby, unsure if they should allow it. The dragon was enormous, and even with the best containment measures, he could be dangerous if startled. But the scientists who had been observing him for weeks spoke quietly to each other. "He recognizes her," one said. "He has waited for her all this time. If anyone can approach him safely, it's her." The girl looked up at the observation platform where the staff had gathered. She gave them a small nod, as if saying, "It's okay. Trust me." Then she took a deep breath, and with careful steps, she moved to the access point that allowed her to enter the vault room under supervision. The dragon noticed immediately. His golden eyes widened, and he lowered his massive head toward her as she approached. The gentle hum in his chest grew stronger, vibrating through the floor beneath her feet. He did not roar, he did not growl, and he did not make sudden movements. He simply watched her with the same patience and recognition he had always shown, waiting for her to come closer. The girl stopped just a few feet away from him. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she held them out slowly. "It's me," she whispered. "I'm here." The dragon's eyes softened further, glowing warmly. He leaned closer, lowering his massive head until it was just above her. She could feel the heat of his breath and the vibration of his hum. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before, strong, comforting, and full of life. Slowly, carefully, she placed her small hands on his snout. The scales were surprisingly warm and smooth, and the dragon let out a gentle rumble that sounded almost like a purr. She felt his heartbeat through the connection, steady and strong, and for the first time in her life, she truly understood what it meant to feel safe. "Father," she whispered again. And this time the word carried with it everything she had felt all these years: fear, longing, relief, and love. The dragon's response was immediate. He lowered his massive body until he lay down beside her, folding his wings neatly at his sides. His enormous tail stretched across the floor, relaxed and still. He pressed his head gently against her hands, allowing her to feel his warmth and strength. The staff outside were in awe. They had never seen anything like this. A human child approaching a creature that had been considered one of the most dangerous in the galaxy. And yet nothing happened. No aggression, no anger, no fear. Only connection, recognition, and love. The girl laughed softly, brushing her hands over the dragon's snout. "I've missed you," she said. "I never forgot you." The dragon's hum deepened, vibrating through her chest. He moved his head slightly, pressing closer, as if to say, "I never forgot you either." Over the next few hours, the girl and the dragon explored their connection. She climbed carefully onto his back, feeling the enormous strength of his muscles beneath her small hands. The dragon shifted slowly to allow her to settle, his massive wings folding back to make space. For the first time, the girl felt what it must have been like when he had carried her as a toddler protected. Safe and completely in his care, the scientists monitored every movement, amazed that the dragon remained calm. They recorded the interactions, but no device could capture the emotional depth of the reunion. The girl and the dragon communicated not with words, but through presence, gestures, and the vibrations of his hum. Every movement of his massive body seemed attuned to her comfort and safety. Her guardian, who had watched quietly, finally stepped forward. "He's really your father," he whispered. "I can see it. He's waiting for you." The girl nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know," she said softly. "I always knew." The dragon lowered his head further, allowing her to rest against him. She felt the scales along his neck, smooth and warm, and heard the soft hum of his chest, steady and rhythmic. She whispered stories of her early memories, fragments of dreams she had once had about flying through space, and the dragon responded with gentle vibrations, as if acknowledging each memory. Time seemed to slow. The station staff barely dared to move, fearing that any interruption might break the moment. The dragon, once feared by everyone, had become the protector and parent of a child who had once been lost to space. The bond they shared was undeniable, unbreakable, and full of love. The girl spent hours with him that day. She climbed onto his back, traced the scales along his wings, and whispered about her life on the station. The dragon responded with small movements, soft hums, and careful gestures that allowed her to feel safe and understood. Every action was measured, gentle, and deliberate. He had waited years for this moment, and now that it had arrived, he was patient beyond measure. By evening, the girl sat near the dragon's massive head, resting her hands on his snout and looking into his golden eyes. "I'm home," she whispered, "and I will always stay with you." The dragon lowered his head further, pressing gently against her hands, and let out a long, deep hum that filled the entire vault room. It was a sound of love, joy, and recognition, a sound that seemed to echo through every corner of the station. For the first time in the history of the station, the glass barrier felt unnecessary. Everyone understood that the dragon's anger and fear had vanished in the presence of his daughter. He was no longer just a specimen or a captive. He was family. And the little girl, who had spent years wondering where she belonged, had finally found her home. The staff began to approach cautiously, bringing food and supplies for the dragon but they did so respectfully, allowing the bond between father and daughter to remain unbroken. Even the scientists realized that no experiment or study could capture the depth of what they were witnessing. It was beyond science, beyond reason. It was a reunion of two beings whose love had survived the impossible. That night, as the station's artificial lights dimmed to signal rest hours, the girl climbed carefully onto the dragon's back. He shifted slightly to accommodate her, folding his wings around her in a protective, gentle embrace. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, beneath her hands. The stars outside the station windows shimmered as if celebrating their reunion. "Sleep now," she whispered softly. "I'm here, and I won't leave." The dragon let out a final deep hum of agreement, curling slightly to create a safe, warm space for her to rest. For the first time in years, both father and daughter felt truly safe, truly together, and truly home got, and so life on the station changed forever. The dragon, once feared and locked away, became a protector, a parent, and a friend to the girl. She, in turn, became his family, his reason for patience, and the joy he had waited years to feel again. Together, they showed everyone that bonds could transcend fear, distance, and even species. The story of the little girl and the dragon became legendary across the station. People spoke of it in whispers and awe, sharing the tale of love, loyalty, and reunion that no one could ever forget. And though the galaxy remained vast and full of mysteries, one truth was certain. Sometimes, the most extraordinary connections come from the most impossible beginnings. And family can be found in the most unexpected places. Father and daughter rested that night. Side by side, a bond finally whole, a love finally complete, and a life together just beginning.